Yo, we just went beatport number 1. My brand new release with Tita Lau, Vibrate and On The Ground, top of the charts. So I'm going to break down for you right here what goes into making a beatport number 1. I'm going to show you how I made the drop, how I processed the vocal, and finally, what is on my master chain. Let's get into Ableton. So when I'm making a tune, I always start with the drop. That might not be everyone's favorite way of working, but it is mine. I tend to make a 4-bar loop with the drop and a 4-bar loop with the build-up before it. So the main thing everyone notices on this tune is the crazy lead. Now there's a fun story behind this because it's actually made out of a vocal. When Tita originally recorded the vocal for this track, it sounded like this.
I tell you this now, then I got to go.
So I grabbed the vocal, dropped it onto Ableton Granulator, which then sounded like this. Kind of weird, right? So we changed some settings, the grain size and the file position. We got this. Take the release down, pitch it down by 12. And then there's a couple more layers that make up the vibrate lead that you know. So as well as this first layer of the vocal synth, I've got some white noise on a layer. I've got another granulator synth, which is just a really nasty version of the main one. Totally sounds out of tune, but it works. And then some crowd noise. After that, I've got a frequency shifter. So if I play it without, and then I play it with, it's just kind of making the frequencies of the whole synth higher. So if I play around with this, you can hear what it'll do. It's just one of those things where you play with it randomly until it sounds cool. A bit of EQ. Another frequency shifter. This one's going to sound really nasty. Just trying to make the sound a bit detuned. After that, I've got all my reverbs and delays. You can see there's quite a few of them. Delay, vinyl reverb, delay 2, and then another EQ just at the end of the chain, and that is the lead synth. Along with the lead synth on the drop, we've got the kick and the bass, the most important bit of any dance track. And if I do say so myself, I think this is the best thing about this track, the kick and the bass. So the kick right here, it's pretty simple. It's actually a kick that I've made myself. I've titled it Kick Hybrid because I've made it out of 2 kicks. So it looks like the tail is off this kick and then I've got the start off another kick. So I can show you how I would do that. If I pull up the sample of this kick and then we'll pull up, let's say this kick. Could have been this kick. May have been another kick, but this would apply to any. So if I want to make these 2 into one kick, we got this and this. Let's say I want the start of this kick with the end of this kick. Then I can kind of mix them together like this. And as long as the waveforms are crossfaded, it'll work. That sounds like a legitimate kick. So that's how I've made this hybrid kick here. And then along with that, we've got the bass, which is coming from Serum. Now this is an Evo Sounds preset and I've automated some parameters on it. As you can see, the tone and the sustain are moving. And there's the automation for that. So if I turn that automation off, you'll hear it's kind of different. It's kind of flat and boring, then you put it back on. Just giving it some interest. So alongside that Serum, I've also got some shitty noise. And you might think by itself it sounds kind of shit, but when you add them together, it lets the bass fill some frequencies in the track that it wouldn't ordinarily be filling, and with this kind of track it just works. I've got sidechain on the bass, keeping it out of the way of the kick. So one thing you'll notice here, that is the exact shape of the kick. If we go onto the kick, you'll see that where the kick stops, that's exactly where the bass starts. So that they never clash with one another. And I've actually put the kick and the bass in a group together. And then on the group, I've got this tape plugin. So that looks like this. It's called Vintage Mix Bus is the preset I've used. And if I turn it off and then turn it on, it sounds like it just brings the two closer together and makes them feel like they're one. I've also got this click on top of the kick. I think maybe my kick didn't have enough top end. After that, the next thing to dive into is the drums. Obviously, super important. I think the drums in this track are pretty cool. So there's a lot of weird loops that I've made myself here. It's a bit of a crazy sound, and it's kind of going with the whole vibe of the bass line as well. I've got some shaping on it to take out some of the long notes at the start. I've got this breakbeat here. And I've used the Ableton Beats effect. Ordinarily, the breakbeat would sound like this. But if I put Ableton Warp into Beats mode, transients, make sure you select that top one, then you can take it down and you can go. So it gives it more of a tech house groove. Random snare. Really cool shaker loop. I think I've made that myself because you can see it's frozen. Open hat. Bit of a background hat. Another open hat, I don't know why I've got two. Don't do that. A couple of other drums. Random cool alien perk. We've got some snares coming up in the build-ups. And you can see I've got automation on this one here. Bringing the top end in so the EQ starts like that and ends open. Another cool thing here is this like clap fill that I've got going on. And then at the end of this, I've made a really long one. So when you play it together. So to make this cool sound, I've recorded this clap out, got the audio, put it in texture mode, doubled the length of it, and then added this auto pan. So I'll play it without the auto pan. And then with. And the rate is being modulated so it makes it stutter. Now the drums are all in a group, and on the group, I've got a couple of plugins to make them a bit more together, if that makes sense. So first of all, I've got this decapitator, which is distortion and saturation, but I've got the mix really low. So if I turn it all the way up, you hear what it's doing. So I've got the mix on about 13% there. And I've got the tone all the way up to bright. I've got the low cut all the way, and then the drive is really high. So it's just to make the top end shiny and come together. I've got this tape called Drum Bus with a preset called Drum Bus. I don't really know what that does, but I obviously thought it sounded good. And then there's some reverb that gets automated up through the breakdowns. Going back to the green bits, green is synths. One thing I've done in this track, every sound that's used in the breakdown has actually come from the lead synth. So here I've got this sample, and that is just me recording the lead synth and resampling it, and you'll see that that gets automated as it comes towards the drop. And the nice thing about using your lead synth for your build-up sounds is it's all going to feel very together. And when that sound comes in on the drop, the listener's kind of ready to hear it. So it's not such a mad surprise. This, again, is the same thing. I made this by recording the tail of this. I'll demonstrate it for you now. Bounce that to audio, and then change the warp mode to texture. Stretch it all the way as far as it will go, 999. And then reverse it, and if you listen to that, it's a really cool riser from the synth. A couple of other bits in this breakdown. That is the same synth again, played on a sample. This is a different synth. This is like a brass sound from Serum. If I unfreeze this. It's got a lot of modulation going on. It's got this... the time on this delay is on 44%, which means it'll speed up and slow down by itself. So it'll give it like an out of tune effect, more frequency shifter. And the automation brings the EQ up on this as it goes. So the first one is quiet, and the last one is very loud and in your face. Again, this is this synth recorded to audio and played as a background noise to fill the space in the breakdown, create tension. Couple of other interesting bits in this. This is a crowd recorded from one of my actual shows with a shaper box on it to make it stutter. So if you listen to it without, and that's constant throughout the track, like really low volume, some background noise throughout the whole track. So jumping into the vocals for this track, you can see she's done a couple of different takes of this vocal until we get one that she really likes the sound of. So if I take all the processing off, then you can hear the vocal just how it is.
I tell you this now, then I got to go. I'm missing your love and the X and O.
Add the processing back in. The processing on this one is not too crazy. The first thing in the chain We've got EQ, taking out all the low end. Next thing we've got is this decapitator. So if I play it all the way wet, you'll hear how extreme it gets.
Tell you this now, then I got to go. I'm missing your love and the X and O.
It kind of makes it sound distorted and like it's through a phone or something. You can see I'm using the low cut there as well on it, and the drive is pretty high. After decapitator, I've got another EQ because it adds a lot of low end sometimes. And then after that, I've got another decapitator. So a lot of the time when people are processing vocals, they're going to need compression. Compression is very important when you're processing vocals. Now, you'll notice I haven't used any compression on this vocal. One thing I found when I work with Tita's vocals, I like using hard distortion and saturation. And when you start adding a lot of that, you don't need compression because it has the same effect on the audio. So just before the drop, we actually double up the vocal. So when it plays again,
Feeling the beat to my soul vibrate.
You'll hear it sort of feels like it has a chorus effect. And that's because we've got two different versions of it playing at once. So if I mute one of them, you'll hear that.
Feeling the beat to my
And then together.
Feeling the beat to my soul vibrate.
So that makes it feel like sort of like a wavy chorus effect just before the drop. All right, so the bit that everyone wants to know, what is on the master chain? There's quite a lot on this one actually, but one thing I will say, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to this. So I'm going to turn off all the plugins and then play you the track and show you what each one individually is doing. This is with nothing on the master right now. So you can hear straight away the mix is already exactly how it sounds without any of these extra plugins on. This is adding the extra 10% on top of the finished track. The first thing I've got on here is a shaper box, and I've got this little hack with shaper box where I'll put it on drive mode, crank this all the way up to 11,000 hertz and then put some drive on it. So you'll hear this just cranks up the high frequencies and adds some extra shine to the top of the track. So without and with. Next thing, I've got this tape plugin. Full mix glue is the preset, and it's only on 21% wet, so I'll do that without. It's quite a subtle change, but people will be able to hear that if they're listening in the studio. The next plugin, this one's really extreme. I use this whenever I'm making music, so FabFilter Saturn, multiband, saturation, distortion, and I think compression as well. I use this preset called Faster Master whenever I'm making music because I like to hear it as though it's a finished track. So this isn't the best mastering plugin, but I like using it when I'm producing, and sometimes I'll leave it on at the end of a track, other times I'll turn it off. In this instance, I've left it on, so I'll play it with and without, and you'll hear how it brings all of the frequencies up. So this is without and with. Now, one thing I'll say about this, if you've got a really well mixed track, then this will sound great on it. But if you've got frequencies clashing, it's going to make it into such a mess. This track's kind of empty, so it works really well on it. The next thing on here is this black box plugin, which is a hardware emulation. Now, I'm using the saturation on high mode, which is going to sort of rebalance the track and add more high saturation, and it'll in turn reduce the lows somewhat. And then I've got this air, which adds a real top end shine to all the sounds. I've only got the mix pretty low on this, 20%. If I turn it up to all the way, then you'll hear what it's doing. So again, it's adding more like polish and shine to the track. The next thing on here is this bus compressor. Now, again, this is really low mix. I've got it on 9% mix. So this is adding parallel compression, some really hard compression to the track, which is going to sort of fill out all the gaps somewhat. As I say, I've got it on a really low mix, but if I turn it all the way up, you'll hear exactly what it's doing. So this is off. So you can sort of hear the squeeze from the compressor when you turn it all the way up. So what I tried to do with this, I saw this on someone else's tutorial online. I've got the attack really slow, the release really short, so the compressor will be going crazy. And then I'll take the threshold down until I get it to about 8 dBs of compression, and then do 8 dBs of makeup, and then take the mix down. Next thing I've got on here is parallel aggressor. I would not recommend using this on a master, and I don't know why I used it on a master, but I'll play it with and without. And this is probably the only time I've ever used this on a master. The next thing is the limiter, and the most important bit. So the limiter is pretty simple. It's got a high pass at 29 hertz because we really don't need anything below that. I'm doing 3 dBs of gain to get to approximately -7 LUFS. Which is where I always try and aim for. Sometimes it'll be a bit louder. I like making my tracks pretty loud. Some people will go quieter than that. But yeah, that is the whole master chain. So if you like the sounds in this track, I've made a sample pack of all the sounds in this track and the other track on the EP called On The Ground. And you can get the sample pack from On The Ground for free right now at jameshype.com/store. So go check that out. Please leave a comment if you like this video and I will make more just like this. Thank you for watching. Make sure you stream and download Vibrate and On The Ground right now, because they're fucking bangers. Who does this? Thanks for watching.